Hello out there internet, or wherever else is watching this. And today I'm going to be trying to fix this Macintosh Classic II. This belongs to my friend, Mac Brutus, and it is not powering on. So he bought this a couple of years ago and unfortunately found out he couldn't power it on because it turns out that this computer has a power supply for the UK, 220 volt, or over here in the United States we're running 110 volt, which obviously will not work here. We suspect it may be an issue with the power board. He may have shorted something out in attempting to power it on. I didn't get a whole lot of details on that, but we did find on eBay there was a listing for a Macintosh Classic II power supply for a reasonable price that was from a US seller, appears to be for a US model, and we're going to try and put it in here. So first thing we're going to do is give the computer a nice cleaning, just because we just got it in. It's been sitting on a shelf for a while. Now, a lot of different things people like to use. I prefer just regular old isopropyl alcohol wipes. Don't have to be fancy. There's brands that are sold for specifically fixing computers and cleaning them up, but this is literally just the house brand from the local grocery store, and it should do just fine to get some of the stains and whatnot off the plastic. So just give that a nice cleaning. Got some blue, I don't know if we can see this on here. Got some weird blueness over in the corner here. Yeah, that comes right off. Probably just leaning up against something. Getting the handle. Now you can get pretty good use out of these alcohol pads or alcohol wipes, but one thing to keep in mind is because it is 70% IPA, just pure alcohol there, not pure 70%, but you know what I mean. Since it's alcohol, it evaporates very quickly, so once you get the shrink wrap off of any of these containers, it does dry out pretty quickly. You might get a few days, you might get a week or two, but there's definitely a shelf life on these tubs once you open them. But I do like buying them by the tub like this because they are much, much cheaper to buy that way than buying little individual packets of like a half dozen or singles or anything like that. Alright, that gets a little cleaner. Yeah, so this is the eBay listing that we found, and it's listed very specifically as Macintosh Classic II power supply board for model M4150, which is the Macintosh Classic II. Looks to be in good shape. Board has been tested and works. Now this does have some nice detailed pictures, so we can see it comes up as part number 6300525, which does kind of follow the pattern of Apple's part numbers. But if we pull up the actual repair manual for this, which has fallen off the great internet truck in the cloud, it lists for the Macintosh Classic II there are 4 models of power/sweep board. 2 for 110 volt, 2 for 220 volt, depending on whether it's revision A or B, and lists 4 different part numbers, none of which line up with the one that we found on eBay, although this number does show up in a few other resources I found online. So we don't actually know if this is going to be the right power supply board or not. We're going to find out. Hopefully once we get in there, we'll also be able to see if there's anything else going wrong, any busted capacitors or anything like that. So first thing I'm going to do is see what this power supply board looks like. This is how it came packaged. For the record, bubble wrap is not ESD safe. It's not the best thing to use, but that's what the seller wrapped it in, so we're going to do our best here. Fortunately, since it's a power board, I wouldn't expect there'd be too many super sensitive things in there, although technically everything is sensitive to one degree or another. The service guide for the Mac Classic II lists 4 different part numbers for the power/sweep board. All 4 part numbers, none of those are this part number. Now the interesting thing is that those are all 661 part numbers. This is a 630 part number. So it's possible, I know Apple occasionally does this, it's possible that just like this little subboard here has a different type of part number on it, these may be individual part numbers for manufacturing for these 2 sub-assemblies that make up the overall part that fits with one of those. But we can tell that this one is definitely a 120 volt power board. So that's the important thing. And yeah, I'm still not anywhere on this seeing the power supply numbers we're talking about. So if it is the right revision or the wrong revision, we will find that out probably when we find out if the cables actually connect, because it looks like the cable connections are a little different between the two. Oh, and it looks like in addition to being a fan of William Gibson, as indicated by the username, the seller of this has a dog. So, hi dog. No preliminary steps required. It contains high voltage and a high pressure picture tube or high vacuum picture tube. Now the good news is I'm still going to do a discharge on it just to be safe, but this computer's not been powered on for well over a year, so we should be pretty safe in terms of that. All right, so we're going to need a Torx screwdriver. It doesn't say what size, so we're going to have to figure that out. And I am actually going to be wearing an ESD wrist strap for this. A lot of people really like to poo-poo these and say, hey, I've never had a problem, but it's a real thing. It doesn't always cause a problem, but it could anytime. Apple themselves takes this very seriously. If I can find it, I will link a video in the description of an old training film that Apple put together back in the 80s. This is nothing new. T10 maybe, it might even be T12. Do I have a T12? That's a T15, that's a little big. Oh snap, it is a T15, okay. It's in tight. Now this is the first one of these classic Macs I've taken apart, and the one thing I've heard online is the two screws that are kind of deep inset in here. Can't really see that. The two screws that are deep inside this handle are widely regarded as the two that are most difficult to remove. Apple recommends you have one like really long skinny screwdriver. One tip I saw that I picked up from Akba Cuckoo's channel, I believe, is with the iFixit kits, if you put on every single one of the extenders, you can get it to fit. And actually, I wonder, it almost looks like just this one extender might be enough. Oh no, those are more recessed than I thought, so I need both extenders. So this is the other iFixit extender. It's meant for getting into weird angles, so it's like a flexible thing, which is a little bit awkward, but it will do the trick. Actually, oh my goodness. So apparently, looking deeper in there, I don't know how well I'm going to get this camera in there. Yeah, there we go. Looks like last time they had it open, my friends did not put the screws up there back in. There it is. So, yeah, I guess in some ways that makes that much easier. Alright, carefully lift the cover and set it aside. So, let's find out what kind of lifting they have in mind here. Alright, so those are already removed, then what are you clipped on with? Definitely seems loose at the bottom here, not at the top. There we go. Yeah, I've heard that once these are open once, they become easier, so I didn't think I had to pry anything, since I know it's already been open. There we go. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned that already. They did have it open once before. My friend Mac and another friend of mine, Matt, opened it up just to take a look inside. And that's when they discovered that yes, this is indeed a 240 volt model, which is why it didn't power on for them. All right, let's set this down carefully. And there's the inside of the Mac Classic II. And did they also include... Oh, that's unfortunate. So, I can also confirm, I'm sure the internet already knew, that the Mac Classic II, unlike the original one, does not have anybody's signatures molded inside it. They probably decided that was not worth the expense anymore. Move the ground wire. Don't we want to short it, discharge it first? Why is the manual not saying to discharge the CRT first? Okay, well, we're going to discharge the CRT first anyway, because that's what you're supposed to do. Even though, as I said, this one's almost certainly completely discharged anyway. Safety first. So before I do this, a disclaimer, I have never actually professionally worked. I've professionally worked on computers. I've never professionally worked on a CRT computer. I had very brief training on one once during that time when I was working at Apple, but never actually had to put that into practice. And even then it was mostly perfunctory. The chances of us encountering a CRT-based Mac at the time I worked there were very, very low. So this is going to be a very quick and dirty way. Do not take what I'm doing as the gospel way of doing this. Consult people more experienced than I. But what I'm going to be doing is creating a grounding tool by clipping a wire onto a screwdriver, flat-headed screwdriver. There we go. That's locked on. And I'm going to not be grounded myself for this. You don't want to be grounded when you're discharging a CRT. You also don't want to use both hands. You want to use only one hand and have the other hand in your pocket or behind your back. The idea being, if you do somehow get shocked by the very high voltages that can be in a CRT, you want it to go straight to ground, not across your chest through your heart or anything like that. So I'm going to plug this into the common ground point that I use for my ESD mat. I'm going to stick one hand behind my back and start poking around underneath this wonderful suction cup that is really solidly on there comparatively. Goodness gracious. It's like glued down or something. There it goes. Yeah, it's just old. There it is. I'm touching only the plastic here. And at that point, once you have it kind of in there, touching the part that the red wire is poking in, you know you're making contact with the anode, which is where any of the very hurty electricity would be. And again, this is mostly just perfunctory at this point because I'm fairly certain this is discharged. And even so, this CRT is fairly small, but if you're working on something bigger like arcade cabinet type things, I'm sure my friend Chris, who's done some arcade cabinet restorations, can attest. Those can carry some bad voltages. But this one was probably already discharged, and now it's even more discharged. So we are good. So back to ESD safety, and we can continue with the disassembly. All right, cover, yeah, I have that off. Power sweep board. Remove the cover, discharge the CRT, and remove the anode cap. Okay, well, removing the anode cap, that part's easy enough. Should be just a clip. Usually you squeeze this, but which way? All right, so now we're going to maccaps.com because they may have some better instructions than the official guide. Pinch, push, and tilt up. Yep, that's what I'm doing. Oh, there we go. So that was a trick to it. So yeah, if you're ever taking one of these out, those clips have pretty large flanges and you do have to pinch pretty hard to get them to squeeze in. But there we have it. Okay, we're going to move on to this side because the power board kind of blocks over on this side, so it'll be much easier to see what I'm doing over here. All right, we do also want to remove the ground wire. Oh. And we do also want to remove the ground wire. Well, that's interesting. So it looks like when you remove the ground wire, you're also taking the CRT itself off of the front case, which seems a little fragile. So I'm actually going to put that screw back in once I've removed the wire, just so that it's not flexing as much on the front bezel, because this is just plastic. There's no reinforcing frame or anything. So this is the video board. We want it to be pulled from the neck of the CRT. The manual does note that if sealant holds the board in place, cut the sealant with an art knife, so we'll have to see if that's the case. This is what that same part looks like. So it looks like the white part that's got a little bit of leftover glue there, that's what we're trying to get off of here. See if I can get a closer look at that. So there's that white part that we're trying to remove. And actually it looks like there is some sealant there, but it's pretty old and not too strong anymore. So I think I can just, yeah, just like real old hot glue. Don't want to twist it though. There we go. Yeah, I don't want to twist it because look at all those little contact points. So that's off of there. Still held on by the wires that come with it, but I got a little bit of the hot glue. There we go. Now it's off. Okay, so we've got the anode off. We've got the video board removed. Remove the logic board power cable from the logic board and remove the Phillips screws that secure the power sweep bracket to the chassis. Then pull the board slightly away from the chassis. Okay, so cable first. Where are you? Oh, you're way under everything. Okay, so we need to disconnect that power cable that's back there, which appears to go down to here. Don't have a lot of light there. All right, just so we can see, I think I'm going to take off that SCSI cable without flexing the board too much. There we go, and now we can see the power cable back here. Disconnect that. It looks like that's kind of routed back under that middle piece there. Can this actually fit through that way? Or? That's kind of a tight fit right there. See if I can get it out without... There we go. Just enough flex in that to pull it up through. Don't know how I'm going to get the other one in, but I'll figure that out when we get there. It's a Canon brand fan. I didn't know Canon made fans. Unless it's a speaker. No, it looks like a fan. It said remove the Phillips screws. The illustration shows two, but clearly we've only got one, so I think we may have another screw that was just not put back in. Well, this one was put in strong enough for both of them. Goodness. Okay. So actually, so far, been surprisingly light in the screw department on a few different levels. Alright, I'm going to come out and say right now, I'm not sure how full-time tech YouTubers do this, because it is really awkward having the camera in front of my face like this, but we're going to figure it out. Alright, so pull this slightly away. There we go. Now we're slightly away. And we've got some additional cables to remove. So this one goes to the yoke. No clips or anything, so just wiggle that one off. This is the video board. This is already kind of separate. And then we're just gonna have, I guess this is the hard drive power cable, yes. It's one of those kind of connectors. And the fan power cable. Oh, that's gonna be the difficult one. Oh, unless it yanked itself right off. Where was that plugged in? Okay, so it looks like that's where the fan was connecting. That white connector right there. Might be a little bent to one side, but it doesn't look off of what it should be. Alright, so the part we want to replace has been removed, so we're going to set the computer off to the side. Let's take a look at what we just took out of here. So we know that this is definitely the 240 volt model, whereas the new one that we're going to put in is definitely the 120 volt model. This part number, very clearly marked as the 240 volt model, 6300560, which is, again, looks like those 630 part numbers, which is what the boards are actually labeled with, are not even remotely what the official Apple part number is. So probably the 661 number was just on like the box that this came to their techs in. And so we don't have anything to go off of for this. So that's good to know. I'm not seeing, cables are kind of in the way, not seeing anything else leaping out at me as bad with this board. It doesn't look like any of those capacitors are bulging or leaking noticeably. I should probably at least take a gander, given the reputation these models have. I should take a gander at the ones that are on the logic board as well, but so far it looks like this one is okay. It's just the wrong voltage compared to our new power board, which, just as before, it looks like this is where that orange label next to the barcode should have been, but we don't have one of those on this model. But we do have the marking on the back indicating 120 volt, which is what we actually want. 120, 110, those are essentially the same thing for these purposes. Now this one, interestingly, whatever this component is, it's got hot glue all over it, which the other one did not have. Not sure what's up with that. But again, aside from some dust, capacitors don't look like they're yelling at me or anything. So yeah, this might actually work. So before we go and put the new board in, one thing we might want to do is at least take a peek at the logic board, make sure that everything looks okay with it, because I've seen online that capacitors have a tendency to leak on this model. So if we're going to deal with anything like that, it would be good to know that ahead of time. This is going to be the floppy data connector. I think that's it for what I need to remove there. Grasp the logic board by the corners and slide it straight up and out of the chassis while it's sitting on its face. Okay, so we're going to very gently tilt it down on its face. And we're going to gently... Really? Oh, it's so cute and tiny. Oh, we're missing a battery entirely, so that's special. So I was worried about the battery leaking, but apparently that's not the concern. And actually, I think, hold on. I was concerned about the capacitors because I know that they can be an issue on this model. But looking at some of these, I think this board may already have been recapped. Okay, now this is interesting. So this is the very small and cute logic board for the Mac Classic II. And I know from some of my research online that these models of Macintoshes have a bad habit of having their capacitors go bad. So there's kits you can buy to recap them and everything like that. So I wanted to take a look at this while I had it open. But looking at some of these capacitors, I don't believe, and I'll see if I can zoom in here. Obviously I can zoom in post, but I guess I'll just zoom in post. I don't believe these capacitors are original because those solder points honestly look pretty terrible. They don't look like they were done at the factory. Which, on the one hand, is actually a good sign because it means that the capacitors have already been replaced, so we're not dealing with the original capacitors. but because those solders are not very good, and I mean, I'm no artist with the soldering iron myself, but if this machine powers on but otherwise has any other sort of issues, I know that's going to be my first guess. And also, no battery in there at all, so don't have to worry about the battery having leaked, but I should probably take a look and see if I've got a correct voltage battery. Try and get a better view of some of these poorly soldered capacitors. Yeah, so I'm not sure how well you can actually see, but this one in particular, this large one, it's hard to see anything, but it almost looks like the wires are bridged. I don't think they are, but they are darn close. I think there's just the tiniest gap in between them. Yeah, I don't know if that's coming out on this GoPro at all, and I don't want to dig out my giant camera, but yeah, so we'll see how that is. I'm glad that it's not the original capacitor, so I don't have to worry about that, but if it's being weird, that's what I'm going to be suspicious of. Alright, while we're at it, that actually didn't seem too dusty, at least. I do find it interesting that there's clearly an edge connector along here, but there's nothing for it to plug into in the back there, so maybe that's used on some of the other models? Not sure. But we're going to slide this back in to its little groove. There we go, lines up nicely. Set it back down. And we're going to put in the new power board, the 120 volt power board, which this one is a little dustier. Ooh, a lot dustier. Alright, it's still at least a little dusty, but I think that'll do. Flip this back around, and I'm going to plug in the fan. The fan's the shortest one. No, they're all kind of short. Oh, okay, well, looks like this is the hard drive power cable, but the power board also came with a hard drive power cable, so I have a spare. That's fun. So, spare hard drive power cable. Don't know if this is coming out on camera. We want to plug that in, and where the hell did you go? There we go. And the fan. There we go. Looks like there are some little, not quite grooves back there, but standoffs at least. Something of that nature. There really are surprisingly few screws holding this computer together. Like, way fewer than I would have expected. How do you do this without getting in the way? Alright, that's mostly secure. We do want to plug in both of these, so that's going to be floppy drive data cable and the, oh, we also got to get the power for the logic board. Let's see if I can route this back on that little clip. There we go. And then snap into place there. This guy, for the hard drive data cable. Oh mine, I see why that one capacitor was so bent over, because again, clearly it's not the original one. Can't get any light in there. It's not the original one, and so it had to bend over to fit underneath that metal bar. So hopefully that's okay. And they didn't just sell them a poorly recapped computer that doesn't work. Alright, so looking at the video board here, you can see it's a circle of little pins, but there is one missing, and that gap has to line up with the gap up here, which I can't see. There we go. There we go, so that is on. I'm not going to re-hot glue it right now or anything. If this works, I'll do that afterwards. Then I need the ground wire and the anode. I guess with the anode first. Again, with that really tight clip. Goodness gracious, that's tight. This rubber is also very aged and starting to get kind of sticky and gummy, which is not pleasant. There we go. Did that do it? I think that did it. Yeah, that did it. Cool. So, the evil suction cup is back on. And now we're going to go back to the Torx. The gummy all over my hands. Remember what I said about IPA wipes? Good for getting weird sticky gunk from decomposing rubber off on your hands as well. And for dust that wouldn't come off from compressed air. This is a power cable that I forgot to connect, I think. And these pins, you can see one is further apart than the others, just like this. Oh, you can't see that. Just like next to that green, this top pin is further away than the others. You find it funny that I'm making a point to try and explain these things like it's instructional when I don't know what I'm doing either. But that's okay. We're all learning together. Alright, get that ground wire back in there. And now the screw will actually fit. When I had this screw out, it didn't go back in fully because clearly the depth of the hole it's going into was done with the assumption that there'd be the extra thickness of the ground wire in there. So when it wasn't, it didn't quite do the job. Okay, so I think that's all the electrical components back. So now, just for the sake of testing, I'm actually going to try and run this without putting the case back on. All right, moment of truth. It's not a happy sound coming from the yoke. Alright, so at this point, it is most definitely high voltage. So we know it's getting power. The hard drive started spinning up, but that yoke made some horrible noises. Second time for luck. Don't think that's a good sound. Okay, so the good news is it gets power now. The bad news is I think the CRT is bad, based on what I'm seeing online. And I don't want to let it run for too long because that sounds like a pretty terrible sound. So, time to hit up eBay again and see if we can find any more CRTs for these old classic Macs. Saw some indications that they were still somewhat findable, although they're all getting old and starting to die. At least the one good thing is that apparently all the classic Macs except for the Color Classic use the same, or at least a compatible CRT for the 9-inch screen. So that's a possibility. But I think that's going to be it for tonight. I think that's as far as we're going to get. So yes, we have a power supply that works. It powers. But that CRT may be no good. So there. That's the end of this video, I guess. Like, subscribe, hit bells, all those good things.